Welcome back to another episode of Know Your Legacy. I'm your host, V, and today's guest is Mike O'Connell. Mike is a pastor as part of the Love Church and Rev community in Omaha. He's also a speaker and a coach. His spiritual journey has led him to grow and evolve in such a way that he's able to breathe life into the people he communicates to now in his own unique way. Mike, it's been a pleasure to speak to you off air, and I'm glad that we're now getting a chance to speak on air.
Thanks so much for having me, V. I'm excited to be with you.
Most definitely, bro. And I think off air, we were going at it. You know, I think we were about to get into some deep conversation. So I thought, let me just hit record. Let's just record this for people because they're going to benefit from it. And I think the first thing I guess I want to get into, which intrigued me as I was looking through your Instagram feed, actually, some of the clips that you'd put on there. And one of the things that you said was your focus, you know, as of recent has been more on giving than getting. And I just wondered, from what you were saying, that wasn't always the case. So what happened?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting because when I think about the idea of legacy, when I think about the idea of making an impact, it's always going to come down to what we give, not what we get. You know, I've just learned through the years, and really it was through just a personal journey, really a journey of athletics. You know, I was super fortunate to play Division I football and to pursue pro football for a while. And I never made it into the NFL, but was playing in the UFL, getting paid, you know, pretty decent money to play football. And I remember being in Las Vegas, getting ready to take the field before a game and thinking to myself, is this really all that life is about? You know, I had been on this journey to get and to achieve my, you know, certain goals. And by no means am I saying there's anything wrong with goals, but when I look at the last, you know, 7 years of my life, it's really been a devotion to service and giving rather than getting. And I'm really finding that that's where true fulfillment is really found. And so I want to just encourage, you know, other people to emulate that and to walk in that and to experience all that comes with lifting others up rather than tearing them down.
That's interesting. You use the word fulfillment because I think so many people have heard that term, especially on speeches and seminars and sermons that are being recorded and posted on the internet now, that it kind of distorts the definition of what it means because so many people use it that we don't really know, you know, what it means because not everyone can experience it. And I guess you can only use the word if you've experienced it yourself. So, you know, asking you, what do you think fulfillment means?
Yeah. So fulfillment for me, man, is, obviously I come from the spiritual side of things. So I often say this, that I know who I am because I know whose I am. In other words, I know that I'm a child of God. And so I live from that place of contentment. And I'll be honest, you know, for years of my life, I was searching for identity. And I just had this longing to be loved and accepted. Well, once I realized that I was loved and accepted by God, man, I know who I am. I'm fully satisfied and fulfilled in that. And now I just live my life really from this place of servant leadership. And so to me, that's the essence of being fulfilled from my perspective. But I love connecting with other people and, you know, figuring out what fills their bucket and what makes them come alive. And I think that as people really discover who they are and what they were made for, when they begin to experience those things and then walk in it, I think that's when, you know, fulfillment really comes along.
Did you grow up in a spiritual or religious family?
Yeah, so I grew up practicing Catholicism was kind of my background. And so obviously, you know, there was faith was part of my life, but there wasn't the same kind of devotion that I have now. You know, right now it's the core of who I am. It's the essence, it's the fuel, it's the driving force in my life. Whereas I would say that previously, you know, I was just kind of a spectator. I was, you know, on the sidelines. I would go into church every once in a while, but you know, what I've really realized over the years is, you know, God isn't after me, like fulfilling a bunch of rules and walking into a building, but it's really about a relationship. And so as I've been on this spiritual journey, I've just recognized the difference between, you know, religion and relationship. And relationship is really rooted in love, you know, and a desire to actually, you know, have that kind of relationship. So it's been an interesting spiritual journey, but it really shifted for me in 2007. That's when I started kind of walking down this path that I'm on now.
What happened in 2007?
Yeah, so in 2007, I was, you know, playing college football at Iowa State, and it was so interesting because I was at this place in my life where if somebody would have looked at my life from the outside, they would probably have thought, man, this guy has it together. I mean, he's playing Division I football. He's going to college. We had just won a state championship the year before. But really deep down inside, man, I didn't know who I was, and I wasn't fulfilled. And I was trying to find satisfaction in really all the wrong things from my perspective, because they're just temporary, you know, like whether it's success in life or in sports or you name it. There's a lot of different things that we search to be fulfilled in. But what you realize as you continue to go in life is when, you know, certain things are removed from your life, you realize, oh man, that wasn't really a firm foundation. And so in 2007, man, I was invited to a Bible study that was put on by our team orthopedic surgeon. And that was really the catalyst for me getting in community and learning more about what it looks like to have a relationship with God.
Yeah, I think, you know, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about, you said about you being on a spiritual journey and the things that you've learned. And one thing that I've learned, and you can tell me if you resonate with this, is I guess the more you build the relationship with yourself, the more you're automatically building a relationship with the higher force or God or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely this element of, I think identity is directly connected to, you know, a relationship with God. And I like to think about this like life is a lot like an onion. We were just talking about this off the air, you know? And I think that as you continue to go through life, it's really a discovery for who God actually made you to be. In other words, as layers are being peeled off, it's like this discovery process of getting to the core of who you were created to be and what you were created for. And my personal belief is ultimately a relationship with God. So when we discover that, though, you know, that's when we start to know who we are and walk in that identity.
How old were you in 2007 then?
So in 2007, golly, man, you're dating me now. I would have been probably, 20 years old.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's quite an early age to have a moment of realization. I guess, saying early age is just relative to everyone, but I mean, it's, as we were just talking about off air again as well, is that, nowadays, this message of spiritual growth is spreading between the younger generation, because more and more younger people are, I guess, catching on to it or waking up or becoming more aware of what they actually want and what they want to do with their lives and taking control of it. And so for you to have that at 20, I mean, how did that change the dynamic of your relationship with your family? Because I guess they only saw you as the football player, the athlete, a certain identity, whatever it is you want to put in that space. And then now all of a sudden you feel like, I don't know, is this me? Shall I take all these clothes off? Like, who am I without all of these costumes on,
Yeah, that's such a great question, man. I mean, there's no question that, making that decision to go down that path, to begin following Jesus and pursuing a spiritual journey, there's no question that it affected my relationships. Now, my family has always loved me and supported me, but there was absolutely, a season there of some growing pains and kind of working through, what does this really look like? It's just perspective, right? We all have perspective based upon our experience. And so their experience was one thing. And then I started going down a different pathway, and it was the same with friends. I mean, it was the same thing with friends, because listen, there were certain behaviors in my life that weren't fulfilling me, that just they were not fulfilling. They were leaving me empty. And so when I started to go down this new path, some of that stuff, started to fall away. And so as a result of that, it impacts your relationships, you know? And I think what's been great is over the years, it's positively impacted my relationships, you know? I mean, all the guys that I lived with in college, I still, you know, text with on a weekly basis. And, you know, I'm in contact with my family, even though we don't live in the same city. We have strong relationship, and they have totally supported me on this journey of now becoming a pastor.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to ask you now as well, because you know, with where you are now, you've become a pastor and you're speaking quite regularly. How does someone actually become a pastor? What does that journey look like?
I mean, I think that there's, you know, different schools of thought and philosophy behind that. You know, in the thing at Love Church, really what we like to say a lot of times is, as leaders, we identify and come alongside what the Holy Spirit's already doing in somebody. So like I was really, the pathway to becoming a pastor was, it was actually really interesting. And I think this story will help encourage some of the listeners. But I was living in Los Angeles, California, pursuing pro football. I had played one season of pro football. I'm living in LA, and a couple of the few months previously were out at the pastors conference. And so I linked up with these guys because I was just on to them. They were authentic, real people that I just had a connection with. And so I was, you know, guys, and one of them challenged me. You there?
Oh, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I think the connection dropped there. I'm not sure what happened. So I wanted to ask you about that because it's interesting. I think different people take different paths to becoming a pastor, right? I wondered what it was for you.
Yeah. So for me, thanks for asking that. It's actually a pretty interesting journey that I went on. And you know, if somebody would have asked me, would you have ever envisioned yourself becoming a pastor? I would have said, no way. And so for me, it goes all the way back to 2012. I was living in Los Angeles, California, and I had finished my first season of professional football in Omaha, and I was out there training in the off season to hopefully make it into the NFL. Well, I came to this crossroads moment because there weren't any opportunities opening up to get into training camp in the NFL. And so I started to think about, okay, what's next in my life? You know, when you go after a pro football dream, there's no plan B. I mean, you're grinding, you're focused. And so all of a sudden I was at this place in my life where I started asking the question, what is next? Well, I met up with a couple guys at a pastor's conference that I had met a few months previous to that. And as I was talking to them after this event, one of them looked at me and said, hey, you're not planted here in Los Angeles. Why don't you, you know, move to Omaha, Nebraska and start serving at this church and studying God's word and just see what happens? And so it's interesting because I call this like a crossroads moment in my life. You know, this guy was a man of few words, and that was simply what he said to me. Now, most people at 24 years old would say, bump that. I am not moving to Omaha where there's snow and it's 30 hours away from here. I'm staying in sunny California where the beach is at and every industry in the world is at. Like, I'm going to start my life here and start building something. Well, as I began to pray about it, I really felt this pull to go to Omaha, Nebraska. So here's what I did. I did the wise thing. 2 weeks later, I packed up all my bags in my 2009 Dodge Avenger, drove 30 straight hours to Omaha, Nebraska with no place to live and no job. And you know what? That's probably when my family thought I was crazy. But I came here in faith, man. And really what's interesting is I have seen God bless that decision in ways that I can't even really verbalize. Really what has happened in the last 7 years of my life is crazy. And so I land here in Omaha, Nebraska, July 1st, 2012. And I just started doing what that man challenged me to do. I started serving behind the scenes and studying the word and getting in the game, getting in community, getting in small group, doing whatever I could. And as time continued to progress, the pastor of this church, Todd Doxzon, who's a great mentor of mine, he started to see something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And so he started, you know, giving me more opportunities to get more involved. And that really just escalated into me coming on full-time staff in 2014, and now here we are, it's 2019, almost 5 years later, and I'm still, you know, serving as a pastor here at Love Church. So I would have never thought that this would be the path. And honestly, even when I came to Omaha, I wasn't sure that this was what I was going to be doing. I started selling medical devices for the first 2.5 years that I was here, you know? So it's been interesting, but I do count it a privilege, because the thing about being a pastor is it's not a glamorous call. It's really a call to serve. It's a call of sacrifice. But I'll tell you what, man, it's a blessing to be able to serve in this community and just help as many people as I can. And it's fun being able to exercise gifts that God has given me, which obviously one of those is communication. So I'm super blessed to be where I'm at, but it was definitely an unconventional route.
Yeah, that definitely seems like, you know, a spiritual journey. That's something that no one else would understand apart from you. But was that a particular night where you sat there and prayed and you were like, I don't know what to do? Like, could you turn to anyone for advice, or was it literally just, I have to just feel the answer that's coming to me and make a decision tonight?
I love that question, man. So for me, it's interesting because there's a book in the Bible, man. It's called Joshua, and there's a story in this particular book about the Israelites, which were God's people, and they're getting ready to cross over into the promised land. So this land that God had promised them, but what stands in between that land and where they're currently at is this big river called the Jordan River. And so what's interesting is when they get to the edge of this river, the instruction was to dip their feet in the water and then it would part. And so it's interesting because when the context of this story, it was written in, you know, the springtime. So there would have been a ton of runoff from the mountains. So can you imagine being told to step into like a really high river flowing at full speed? Like, I don't know about you, but I probably wouldn't be willing to do that. That takes some serious faith to believe that God's going to do what he said he would do, which was parted. So it's interesting because as I was praying about this move to Omaha, Nebraska, I was reading that scripture. And so it's interesting how in that story, it wasn't until they dipped their feet into the water that it parted. And what I felt compelled in my heart was, or what I felt like God was speaking to me through that was, you stepping into the water is going to Omaha, and then watch me just part the pathway to your promised land. And so I just had to be willing to trust that promise, you know? And so that's really what it looked like for me.
See, this is the thing though. I love that was the story, because then it leads nicely into how other people would deal with that, because other people feel like they have a dream or a calling or something that they want to do, but they can't see all the steps. They can't see past the fog. Because the way I see it from my journey is that there's a fog in front of you when you're trying to go down your own journey. So you'll only be able to see, just like in a fog, the 2 steps in front of you. That's it. And then when you go those 2 steps, you'll be able to see the next 2 and the next 2. You'll never be able to see the whole street. You can't. It's impossible to do that unless you physically walk through it. So you have to have the faith that the pavement will be there when you walk. And same way that you had to do is hope that there was a life waiting for you in Omaha. But how did you get to the level of belief that allowed you or enabled you to take the action?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's kind of hard to even give a, you know, educated response to that kind of question, because quite honestly, it sounds ridiculous. I mean, sometimes when I tell the story, just the reactions that I'll get from people is like, wow, you really came 30 hours across the country with no job and no place to live. Like, what were you thinking? That doesn't, like, people wouldn't stamp that as responsible. But to your point, there's this core belief deep down inside of us. And, you know, for me, I just believe it was God really, really drawing me to this city. And it was undeniable. But it was more experiential. So it doesn't really make sense to your ears, even as you maybe hear the story, but there was a peace as I went. In other words, when I was driving those 30 hours, there was no fear. There was only peace, knowing and trusting that in this step of faith, I would be met with, solid ground to step on. And to your point, man, I think that what you just said, the picture that you just gave to the listeners is so crucial. And I think that we need to hold on to that. We need to grasp this concept that you're talking about being in this fog. And sometimes we can only see the 2 steps in front of us. I think that really describes the process that we're all in called life. I think that's our problem is many of us, we see certain things in the future, but a lot of times we can only see a couple steps right in front of us. And we've got to be okay with that. We've got to be willing to embrace it because that's what makes this thing an adventure, right? If we knew steps A to Z, man, this wouldn't even be fun. But it's fun when you step out into the fog and you keep stepping. And that's why I love, getting to know influencers and people that are making a great impact, and even people in the spiritual space that are, speaking on a greater level. And a lot of times you hear them say, I never envisioned my life being like this. I mean, a lot of times, without vision, we're going to perish. Like, we need to have vision. But a lot of times, man, in life, that vision that we once had, it turns out just a little different. And the reality is we wouldn't change it.
Yeah, it's just true. It's so true, man. You wouldn't change it because what ends up happening is what ends up helping you grow. And that's what I realized for all of these situations that you go through that initially you think, it caused me to feel a lot of fear, or I was afraid, or it was something that made me really uncomfortable. In the end, there's always something that comes out of it. And usually it's the fact that your character was grown. And then because you love who you've become, you wouldn't change it. Then automatically you have to love the experiences that came with that, right?
That's it. I like to say this. You can either have comfort or you can have growth, but you can't have both. Isn't it interesting? Like, I'll be honest. I mean, just the human brain. Let's just take the brain. I've been studying the brain a lot more, and I'm not pretending to be, some super smart guy. But our brain does. It's very protective, right? I mean, the brain, tries to protect us, and so I think naturally, human beings, we love our comfort, right? We don't like discomfort because our brain tells us to run away from discomfort. But I think that if we would be willing to embrace uncomfortable, that's when true growth happens. And you know what? Adversity is a good thing. Adversity is a good thing, but it definitely presents us with a choice. We can either, number one, quit, right? When we face adversity. Number two, we can blame others or blame our circumstances. Or number three, which I like to tell people to do, is we can seize the opportunity. And if you and I, in this space of process, in this life, if we'll learn to embrace it, if we'll learn to embrace uncomfortable, then I believe, man, that we will experience amazing things in this life. But many of us fall short because we're unwilling to embrace it. And I think it really needs to become a daily practice or a weekly practice, right? There are things in our life that we can do that make us uncomfortable and that train our brain to embrace uncomfortable. For me, that's exercise. It's getting with a group of guys and training in ways that I wouldn't by myself. And because I do that 3 days a week, I'm not only training my body physically, but I'm training my mind to push past uncomfortable,
That's what I've realized as well. It's all a brain game, because that's our computer, right? And if you can understand how to manipulate that computer, then you can build yourself a supercomputer. You can access more of it. You can get it to do what you want it to do. But you can't do that unless you study yourself. Take the time to learn about yourself. Take the time to understand who you are, what you're capable of, and how other people have done certain things and gone through experiences. And when you realize how the brain works, which is going through pain and then growth and repair, growth and repair, growth and repair, then you just want more of it. You embrace everything that comes with discomfort, because then, on the other side of that, I'm going to become better and stronger. And then the next chapter of my life will just be bigger and brighter than the last one, right?
That's it. What would you say for you? What has allowed you to become self-aware? Because as I've gotten to know you, even in this short time, at 26 years old, that's right, 26.
Yeah.
So you're 26 years old, and you just seem like you're very self-aware, and you keep alluding to this self-awareness because it's true. A lot of people, the reason why they hate their life or they're not making the strides that they want to is because they're not self-aware enough to realize what actions are leading to that outcome, or what decisions they're making that have them in the place they're in. But when you have self-awareness, that really becomes the catalyst, I think, for really stepping into the things that you were truly created to be stepping into.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think it's similar to your crossroads moment, right? Like if I was to think about my version of that, which is after graduating and coming out with a law degree, I went to law school because I thought, okay, I that's the next logical step. I don't really know what else to do, even though I know I'm not super passionate. After that, I was like, after this year of going to law school, this definitely isn't something that I want to do. Like I couldn't stand filling out an application online. I couldn't do it. I remember Saturday morning, I woke up early. I was like, I'm going to do it this weekend. So I opened up a company and I went onto the application page and I couldn't type. My hands couldn't move. I can't do this. This is like betraying myself. And I couldn't make sense of it because I didn't know everything that I know now. But then I went down my own journey. I said, look, I'm going to find a job locally around here, keep supporting myself while I figure this out. But I know I want to do business or do something for myself. I want to be in control of my own destiny and do something. I don't know what it is, but something. It's the whole 2 steps thing, right? 2 steps at a time, 2 steps at a time. But during that process, I was searching for answers. The answers came from YouTube videos, and then that leads to books, and then that leads to videos, and then seminars, and then you just keep going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole until you realize you come to a point where you think, okay, I've got a broad perspective of everything that everyone said. Now it comes down to me, because their common message is study yourself. The reason that they've become as wise as they've become and got what they've got is because they took the time to study themselves and figure out this game called life, right? And the only way to figure it out is by studying yourself, because then you realize that the world and yourself are not quite, you're not that different. That if you understand yourself, you understand how other people work, because at the end of the day, you're all human. And then you take it a step further and understand how the universe works, because you're a part of this whole system. Then you can manipulate the universal laws, and then you can start to see how everything's put together, and then everything becomes a big game, because now you realize, actually, I'm not attached to anything. I'm not attached to my body. I'm not attached to this world. I'm a spirit that's free flowing, that's come into this body for a short period of time. I'm going to learn as much as I can, make this an adventure, and impact as many people as I can. And that's it.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
So, yeah, I mean, for you, obviously it's led you to where you are today. And you've read so many passages and so many, I guess, parts of the Bible. Because I saw you speak recently, actually, and you were talking about how we're not born. I think you said, let me just bring it up because I don't want to say it incorrectly. You said the church doesn't exist for us; we are the church. And I was thinking that sounds quite powerful, but I wasn't quite sure what it meant. I was hoping that you'd be able to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good, man. So I like to say this, that the church doesn't exist for us. We are the church, and we exist for the world. And so it goes kind of back to what I was saying in terms of the difference between religion and relationship, right? And like I recognize, and again, this is my perspective, this is my vantage point, is that, God created me for personal relationship. And I believe that relationship, it like the reason or my ticket to have the relationship is through Jesus. I mean, that's what I believe. And so the Bible says, man, that when we come to that place of understanding, that he gives us his Holy Spirit, right? Which, obviously the Christian God, we believe in a triune God, right? And so God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And so now I become this vessel of God's presence wherever I go, so really I'm carrying his very presence, right? Like if you just look at the course of the entirety of Scripture, you notice that all along the way, what did God really want? He wanted to be with his people. And that's why in the Old Testament, he chose the Israelites, right? And he began this journey with them because he wanted to be with them. He wanted relationship with them. And then that leads up to, Jesus coming to earth. And really the Bible talks about the thing that separates us from God is sin, right? But Jesus paid for that by dying on the cross on our behalf and raising from the dead. And so he's created this ability for us to be born again. And so now what's beautiful about this is God's Spirit's in me. And so the church isn't a building. I'm carrying his presence wherever I go. And I have the ability to live a sacrificial life, to love people unconditionally right where they're at. I think many people have a picture of God as being this ogre in the sky, like, follow my rules or I'm going to zap you, right? But no, he wants relationship with us. We're not going to be perfect, right? We're made perfect by what Christ did. And so that's my, my personal belief. And so that's why I say that. And I will continue to say that because, listen, people have been hurt by the church. People have a misunderstanding of what a relationship with God looks like. And church is not about climbing this ladder to God, but he actually came down to us. And now he commissions us to go into this world and be difference makers, world shapers, loving people wherever we go and serving humanity.
I love
So
that, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I say what I say, man.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. I appreciate you taking the time to break that down. But you've mentioned, so throughout this conversation, you've mentioned obviously your religious side and you've mentioned your spiritual journey. Is there a difference for you between spirituality and religion?
Spirituality and religion.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that sometimes to me it's like, almost like semantics. Like, I mean, just it depends what that word means to you. I mean, I always laugh, when people talk about, say, are you religious? Like, you're really religious, and for some reason the word religion and religious kind of just rubs me the wrong way. And partially because, that was more of my lifestyle, as I was growing up. Like, it was just kind of a religious duty. It seemed like a bunch of do's and don'ts. And I didn't really understand the concept that God really wanted a relationship with me. And so when I hear the idea of religion and spirituality, I mean, I guess you could kind of lump them into the same category, but really I think that religion in our culture is just it's like I said. I mean, there's just I think that it affects people differently, and sometimes there's a misunderstanding because I think being religious about something is something that you're devoted to, you're repeatedly doing, and so we're all religious in some right? It just depends what we're religious about, and so. But yeah, I think that I like to talk about being on a spiritual journey with God now. It's more of a journey. It's not about doing, but it's about being. It's about being present. It's about walking with him daily. And so that's really what I think about when I think about that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that because I guess so many people have different takes on, what they think the word means. And so it's just interesting to get your perspective on that. But what would you say is something that you're trying to figure out for yourself at the moment, like where you are in your journey right now?
Yeah, just like in life. You mean just in life in general?
Yeah, in life. Like, so where you're at in your spiritual journey, like what's the thing that you feel like, I'm really trying to understand this a bit more?
Yeah, I think, well, it's always ever changing. I think every day is a journey. That's what I love, man. It truly is just about waking up every single day and continue to build this relationship with God. I mean, the reality is there's no guarantees on this earth, right? I mean, there's no day that's guaranteed. And so for me, I mean, one area that I've like really been pressing into is just the idea of gratitude. Learning to be thankful in all circumstances, no matter what's going on in my life. I really think that that's a position of power. And I really believe that it's a supernatural position because it's not natural for us to be grateful in difficult times. But I think that's, to me, having an eternal perspective, understanding that this life is short and we're here for, a blip on the radar, can allow us to have a greater perspective on what this life is actually about. And so I've just been really leaning into this idea of gratitude, and I think it really blesses God, but it also blesses others. I think gratitude is contagious. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever walked through a season that a friend or a family member has been walking through that was difficult, when they can find gratitude or greater perspective in the midst of that difficult circumstance, it's really inspiring and it's encouraging, isn't it?
Definitely is, man. It's a shift in perspective, and it takes, as you said, it's not our natural state of being. We naturally want to just stay in that state of mind of just feeling sorry for ourselves and focusing on what's going wrong. And it's funny you mentioned gratitude, because that's something that I'm really focused on now as well. And I wanted to ask you this next, in terms of how you keep your, I guess, attitude of being grateful and of being in that mindset on a daily basis. Because in the mornings, what helps me is to really write out or say out 2 or 3 things that I'm really grateful for before I start the day, because then I'm starting with a mindset of gratitude.
Yeah, I have a simple routine. I love routines. I think that they can help us, right? And I think preparation is the key. We're not going to just wake up and accidentally be grateful. It's a choice every single morning, because you know what the reality is every morning when I wake up, who am I really thinking about? Me, myself, and I, right? I think that's just true of humanity. And so what I do is I try to posture my heart to get my eyes off of myself. And so I go through the same journaling process every single morning. The first thing I start with is I write out 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for. So right from the bat, I'm getting my eyes off of myself. I'm getting my eyes off my circumstances, and I'm finding gratitude no matter what my season of life looks like. Then I write out 3 things that I'm praying for my wife, and then 3 things that I want to pray for my children. And it's so great, because if I start with gratitude and then I think about my wife and then I think about my children, there's no room for me on that list by the time I get through that. And it's not that I don't, care about what I'm walking through and things that I'm going through, and, just, don't ever think about, the journey you're on yourself. I mean, awareness is crucial. We've already talked about that. But I start my day every day like that, so that I can posture my heart in a place of gratitude.
It's important that you mention about, your family as well, I guess, or anyone who's listening, the people that are most important to you, whoever you want to place in that space. If you don't have a wife and kids, and it's pushing your mind a little bit further than just what you're grateful for in your life, then to say, okay, what am I grateful for? What do I want for other people as well? So I really love that you extend it out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the culture that I long to create inside of my home. I believe that, for me, what I've learned as a husband and as a father is that my impact outside the home is directly connected to my impact inside the home. In other words, everything flows from the culture that's being created inside of my home. And so if love is abounding and grace is abounding in the home, and there's synergy and there's unity and there's vision and there's purpose and there's reasons why we do what we do and decisions that we make, it's going to cultivate this, it's like a wave that just, it's like throwing a rock into the water, right? There's that ripple effect. And I'll tell you what, man, as I've really focused in on my family, I've seen greater impact outside the home. I just believe in my experience that that has been, it's really been something that's a growing passion of mine. Because, I like to say this: success at work without success at home isn't success at all. I think Dale Partridge might have said that quote, but I've really kind of adopted that mentality and that mindset, because I think many of us think that, I can either be successful or not. And if I'm going to go after my dreams, then that's going to cost me my family, and I need to forsake them in order to achieve success. But Michael Todd, another mentor that I follow, he's a pastor down in Oklahoma. He talks about finding your pace of grace. In other words, you got to understand your season, right? Like, I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. So my season at home looks different now than it may look in 5 years. But it's all about awareness, right? We need to understand that, because if we'll lead in the home well, then that will flow out into our calling.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right, because who you are at home, I think actually, I don't know if it was Tony Robbins or someone in the personal development space said something about if you didn't have success in private, then public success doesn't really matter, because what you do in private is what ends up showing in the public arena. And if there's a difference in that, then ultimately either you're coming off as an ingenuine person, or there'll be some sort of friction that will lead you to, go in the direction of depression, which is what you're talking about, the whole flow state, because then you feel that you can be yourself privately and publicly, because you're essentially the same person. So you're just letting your energy flow without any blockages.
That's it. And that's why I think we see, we wonder sometimes why super successful people are taking their lives, or they are super unfulfilled. And by the way, that's super sad. And I'm super passionate about helping those kinds of people. But I think why that happens is because, we chase this place in life, and we leave everybody behind us that we had close relationship with. And we realize when we achieve that success that it's really not fulfilling, and it doesn't matter if the people we love the most aren't right there with us. And so Jordan Montgomery talks about this a lot. He's a great friend of mine. He's been on the podcast, impacting a lot of people, but he talks about, posturing his heart to really care about, what people, like the people you're closest to, what do they say about you? And I think that's a good meter and radar for us in our life, because ultimately that's what matters, right? I remember being 17 years old and having a perforated bowel, crazy injury, almost died, lost 30 pounds, 20 some staples, all my organs were taken out, emergency surgery, the whole nine. And you know what really meant the most to me when I was in the hospital for those 7 days were the people around me. That's what really matters, And so I think around this whole topic that we're talking about right now, let's not leave the people closest to us for what we think is gonna, truly fulfill us.
Yeah, no, you're right. Exactly. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this whole thing that you said about the private and public thing. And it reminded me of what people tend to say on social media quite a lot, and outside of that as well, which is, it's lonely at the top. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, it's not if you bring everyone with you. So it's just like it's like we're put into this mentality of, oh, it has to be as a CEO or the leader of your own life, or the leader of the community, whatever it is. If you're doing something big, you have to be by yourself. Well, in private, yes, you have to be by yourself, because you're doing the grinding, you're putting in the hours, you're doing the thing to get it off the ground. But ultimately, as you're building momentum, if you can share that momentum with others and help them in the right direction, you're just pushing everyone's energy up. And so as you start to rise, you bring everyone else up, and then you all rejoice together.
And you know what I think really drives that, V, is having values, having a value system, and understanding priorities, right? Because the reality is if my eyes are on how everybody else is doing it, and I adopt their value system or their way of thinking, then I'm just going to be a robot and do exactly what they've done, right? But for me, like I let my values and my priorities drive my life, so that no matter where God takes me, it could be at the level I'm at right now for the rest of my days, or he may increase influence and allow me to step on bigger stages. But you better believe that because the values and priorities are in place, man, I'm bringing my family with me and those closest to me. And I understand the importance of community. I believe that the atmosphere you and I permit decides the product that we produce, right? We're becoming like the 5 people we hang around the most. And so we need to look at our squad, man. Are the people that I'm hanging around value the same things that I value? Because if they don't, man, they're probably pulling me away from what I'm really trying to create. So get around some people that think like you, and be okay with doing things counterculture. You don't need to fit into a system or a way of doing things. You were created uniquely to not look like the person to your right or the person to your left. And I believe that, man, for me, that gives me a lot of freedom to know that, man, I can keep making an impact and make my family really, really important in the process.
I love that, man. I can hear it through your words that you've got your values and priorities in the right place, because you're talking with passion with what you're saying. So what would you say is the hardest thing about what you do as a pastor?
Oh, man. I think the hardest thing, man, is, and this is, I was actually laughing. I was having a conversation with a business man the other day, and he was joking. He was saying, man, it's just tough because, I got to deal with people. And isn't it interesting? I mean, I'll be honest, man, I'm difficult. Like, I don't know how my wife puts up with me all the time, right? I mean, I've got issues. I'm selfish and I'm in process and that's just humanity. And so I think for me, what's difficult is, like there's always things to be done in this field. In other words, it's sometimes hard to see your mission happening because, in the midst of being a pastor, you're dealing with, on one occasion you could be celebrating a wedding and then the next day, man, you're doing a funeral, or you're walking somebody through a divorce or losing a child. And so there's these moments of celebration, but there's also these moments where you're walking with people through the greatest tragedy in their life. And that's not easy. And sometimes the situations that we're faced with as pastors, there's no training for it other than just walking through it with somebody. You know what I love about Jesus? I love that when Jesus walked this earth, all throughout the scripture, it says that he had compassion on people. He was willing to be interrupted. He was willing to be sacrificial. And you know what, man? I've just been trying to grow and embracing that lifestyle because I think that that's really what we're called to as pastors. And so it can be difficult though sometimes, but I'm trying to grow in embracing it.
Talking about it being difficult, the other thing I was curious about was when you're just about to deliver a sermon or you're about to deliver a message, do you ever feel nervous like a few minutes before when you're thinking, am I going to be able to do it and do it justice? Am I going to be able to deliver this with the way it needs to be delivered?
Every time. And you know what I tell people? I tell people that nervous energy is not a bad thing. Obviously there are things that we can do to relax. I love it. Ben Newman was, I got to listen to him give kind of a speaking seminar, and he talked even about just some breathing techniques that he does before he goes on stage. And so there's definitely some practical things, but I'll tell you what, man, when I'm going on stage to communicate God's word, there's something healthy about being in this posture of, I need you to show up, God. I need you to move on my behalf. I just want to be a mouthpiece for you. There's something really healthy about that. And you know what? I think sometimes it's dangerous to think, man, I got this. I think pride sometimes, comes before the fall. And I always want to be in this posture of humility. There's something really attractive about getting on stage and having what I would call Godfidence, this humble command, this ability to not be timid, but to be confident, but in a humble way, right? And I think that posture is developed when we're going on that stage with a little nervous energy, we're relying on God to show up, specifically as a pastor. Now, when I speak outside the church, it's the same thing, man. I mean, at the end of the day, when I'm speaking, it's not about me. At least that's my perspective, right? When I get an opportunity to speak to whether it's 5 people or 500 people, my approach in that is really I'm there to serve them. I'm there to hopefully answer some questions that they may have, or to inspire them, or to encourage them, or to stir them up in such a way that they leave that place and they go take further action in whatever they are being encouraged in. So I consider it a great responsibility.
I love what you said about that term Godfidence. Like I heard you say that before as well. And I was going to ask you about that. So I'm glad you brought that up. But it's just like believing in the higher power to flow through you, right? Like regardless of what you're feeling. And the way I see nervousness as well is just a chance to grow. It's just because I'm getting anxious because this is going to be another breakthrough. That's all it is. And then you have to train yourself to lean into it. As we said before, it's a brain game. So if you can realize actually it's not something to be scared of, but to actually lean into so that I can grow from it. And eventually the next time you face an event like that, there'll be less and less and less nerves. So I don't know if you ever feel like that happens to you, like where you get less and less and less nerves because you feel like you're used to the whole experience a lot more.
100%. I mean, there's no question that there is if you went back and watched one of the first times I gave a talk, you'd be like, oh man, you were nervous, dude. Like you were moving around a lot. And I still love to move around a lot because I love to be energetic and to connect with people. and, you know, be dynamic in that regard. But I'll tell you what, man, as I've continued to communicate more and more, I've just gotten more and more comfortable. It's really a conversation, right? That's the way I look at it. And I think what's so beautiful when you can rest in that place is it really allows for organic moments to connect with your audience. I once read a book by John Maxwell where it talked about many communicate, but few connect. And it was all about the idea of when we get on stages or when we come into a room, you know, are we actually connecting with people? And I think that happens in more ways than just the words that are coming out of your mouth, but it's posture, right? It's nonverbals, it's eye contact, it's the way you dress. It's all these different things that are communicating to your audience and ultimately with the goal of connecting with them.
I love that. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that because it's true. Building a, you know, anyone can speak, anyone can share, but it's the way in which you do it which leaves a lasting impression with the way that the people receive it. Because ultimately you want to give them a feeling of impact, not just a regular kind of energy, which everyone does give. So that's the best way to stand out. And I think if we, again, it comes back to, you know, self-awareness. If you're able to realize I need to improve my energy or I want to give out this type of energy, then you're more likely to be able to be successful in that. Like, for example, in some of the earlier podcast episodes I did, this is like, I think episode 29, actually, one of the guests said to me, because I asked him, I said, look, what can I do to improve? How am I coming across? Because obviously looking back now, I was terrible then. And he said, look, so purposely change your state before you're about to go live. So if you want me to feel enthusiasm, you need to feel enthusiastic. So I sat with that for a long time afterwards. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to do these practical things like breathing and energizing my body and saying affirmations before I go live by getting myself in the right state, because then I know I'm going to deliver with energy and that person's is going to create the most impact between us, because this is the first time he or she's meeting me and vice versa, the first time I'm meeting them. And if I want to create some fire, I already need to be lit up, you know? So that stuck with me.
That passion is felt. And it's interesting because if you study like speaking, public speaking, I think there's studies that will show that, you know, passion is what ultimately sticks with people the most. I mean, if you think about the times you've been in the room or you've connected with various people, it doesn't matter if it's one-on-one or you've been in a room with a speaker. When you come into contact with somebody that's super passionate and energetic about what they're talking about, but then it's also genuine and authentic, man, that's when it's powerful. That's when there's an exchange. I like to call this exchange, right? It's like you and I right now, there's a synergy because you showed up, man, and you're ready to ask amazing questions and engage in great dialogue. And so to your point, anytime we have an opportunity to communicate, there's no question that state of mind is important.
Most definitely. So just before we get into the last few questions, then there's one thing that you were saying just before we hit record was I talked about curiosity, and you were like, "Oh man, I recently, you know, talked about that or started writing about it." So, what was that? What was that you were going to share before we get into the last few questions?
Yeah, that's so good, man. You know, it's funny because one thing I love to do, like one outlet for me, is art. And I don't have any sort of background. I didn't go to school for it or anything, but in the last handful of years, you know, I've just kind of learned graphic design on my own. And, you know, as you have engaged with some of my content on Instagram, you know, whether it's video or graphic or whatever, it's like storytelling for me. And there's this beautiful thing that happens when I begin to engage in that. But there's something about seeing a picture, right? And then almost it's like visual storytelling, like a picture will speak to you, right? And then you'll start to write on it. And I was looking at this photo of my two children standing in this hospital window, kind of like 4 stories up, kind of overlooking some of the city, you know, and just this kind of broad area. And as I looked at this photo, I started to think about there's something so beautiful in children, and it's this awe and this wonder and this curiosity that they carry. But there's a tendency, I think, as we grow older and as we become adults, to lose some of that wonder and curiosity. But I really believe if you look at elite performers, that's something that they just never lose. They never lose curiosity and wonder, this journey of continuing to learn and read. And I believe that readers are leaders and leaders are readers, and listening to podcasts and all these various things. And I've just been really leaning into this idea of curiosity and wonder, and really trying to have more awareness as to where I'm at with those things. Am I losing curiosity in my life? Am I losing this idea of wonder? Or do I still have this childlikeness about me that really causes me to go on this amazing adventure in life, right? Like, our best days are ahead of us, and there's so much more. And we don't have to be victims to this season of life. We don't have to die in our 20s and get buried in our 70s like everybody else on this planet Earth. We can be on this amazing adventure, but I believe that curiosity and wonder are a big piece of that.
One thing that I read recently that really resonated with me, actually this was last year, but from what you said, it brought it up again to my mind, which is adventures only happen to the adventurous. So you have to be looking for it. And I think it starts with, say, let's just take the average person who's completely, deadbeat, and the curiosity has been beaten out of them. Life has happened. They're just working for paying the bills. They've got no energy in them. They haven't got that sense of curiosity. The best way, I would say, to reignite that is just to ask one question: what else? And then even if it means searching it up on the internet, because we have access to so many other people's lives, to see what else is available. How are other people living? Because then one question leads to the next and leads to the next and leads to the next. And then it's never ending, because then as you start searching for more and more and more, answers will show up, and you will naturally be drawn to some resource, some video, some person, some experience. And again, that will open up more questions and more resources and more people. And it becomes never ending. Just like a child, they can never run out of questions. It's only when we tell them to stop asking them, will they just accept the answers they're given.
You're so spot on, man. Completely spot on. I was recently taking my son on a trip. It was about 2 hours away. I think he asked me 1,000 questions. He's the most inquisitive young man. Like, he wants to know everything about everything. He asks so many questions that it's borderline annoying.
He's
but
growing.
but it's beautiful, because it's teaching me something, exactly what you just said, right? Like, if we will kind of commit ourselves, if we will commit ourselves to asking more questions, then I just believe we're going to find more answers that are going to invigorate us to continue to go on this journey, right? I think that, we've been given 2 ears and one mouth, right? And when we're speaking, we're just retelling stuff that we already know. But when we're listening, we have the opportunity to learn something new. And so I think that if we'll commit ourselves to becoming better listeners, I think that can really be the catalyst to be reinvigorated or sparked with asking the next question that will lead to the next question, to the next question. And really, in that process, you can find hope. Like, I want to talk to somebody that's listening right now. You may find yourself in a hopeless season, or you're wondering what your legacy is, or you haven't found your calling, or you know what? Here's the reality. We're all on this journey. Even people that you're looking at that seem like they have it together, that seem like they have it figured out, they're still asking some of the same questions that you're asking. But the difference is, will you get on this pathway? Will you step into this journey, and will you embrace the process and continue to ask questions along the way? I believe as you'll commit to that, you will find hope, and you will continue to step through the fog and land on solid ground.
Yeah, definitely. I love that we're ending on this kind of note, because it just leaves the space open for people to to ask themselves, what am I happy with where I'm at? If I'm not, what else is possible for me? And step by step try and transform my life into what I see in my mind I want. So just to wrap this up with the last few questions, I think the first one you kind of just answered, and you could say the same thing, or you can say something different, whatever comes to you. If you had a microphone and the whole world could hear you, what would be the message you'd share with them?
Man, I was in 2007, I was hopeless. It seemed like I had everything together, but I found so much hope in having a relationship with Jesus, man. It's transformed everything in my life. I wouldn't be married to the girl I'm married to. I wouldn't have the children that I'm married to. And so I would share that message, man, with the world. I would share it, and I would encourage people, and I would let them know, man, that God loves them so much, and wants to take you on an amazing adventure.
I love that, man. And I can just hear it through your voice. I'm getting excited just listening to you.
Yeah, man. Come on.
What would you say is the biggest lie that we're being told by society today?
That you don't measure up. You know, I think that, you know, I love what the internet has given us access to, right? I mean, look at us. We're all the way across the world from one another, and we're connecting through the internet. And I love social media, the ability to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't be able to connect to. But I think there's just this lie that I don't have what it takes, right? I think that particularly for men, a lot of men struggle with the lie that I don't have what it takes. But you do have what it takes, right? But you are uniquely created. You weren't created to compare your life to the person to your right or to your left. And I think many of us fall victim to that lie and to that mentality, because we're taking our reality, comparing it to the highlight reels on the internet or on social media, right? And it creates this gap. And I like to call this gap the discontentment gap, right? And so I believe a lot of men struggle with thinking that they don't have what it takes. And I think that a lot of women, they want to know that they're beautiful, right? And that they're lovely. And again, they can fall victim to the lie that they're not. But I want to tell any lady that's listening, you were made in the image of God, and he didn't make a mistake with you. And so when you're looking at Sally and Lizzie and all these girls on the internet, and you're comparing who you are to them, it's going to leave you dissatisfied and unfulfilled. Don't fall victim to that lie. Come on. I'm getting excited now. And so those are just two that I would address right now.
No, I love that. I love you bring that up, because that is, there's negatives and positives to the internet, and the negative side is gives us a source of comparison. And I know I did that just recently. Going back 1 month, you fall prey to it. You wake up and you on your phone, you're like, oh, maybe I'm not doing enough with my life, man. I'm not really satisfied. Then the gratitude goes out the window, and you realize, hang on, I can't measure my whatever chapter I'm on to a completely different book. They're not even in the same book. So how can you compare chapters? It doesn't make sense. So yeah, no, I love that. And the final question is, when all is said and done, what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
Wow, that's such a phenomenal question. When I'm taking my last breath on this earth, I want to, my prayer is that those closest to me were impacted deeply by the way that I love them and I serve them. In other words, I want, my children and my wife to continue that legacy for the remainder of their days. And my prayer is that my legacy would be generational. In other words, this pathway that I'm on is it's new, it's fresh, it's different. And I pray that, my son Judah, my daughter Journey, my wife Jerica would just continue that legacy of being servant leaders and loving people unconditionally.
You're doing that already, bro. Like you're already, putting that image out there, you're putting that message out there, and the energy, most importantly. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey and your wisdom. What's the best place for people to find out more about what you're doing and, what you're going to be doing in the future as well?
For sure. I would say right now, Instagram is the space where I'm the most active. And you can follow me on there at Mike_3 times O'Connell, OCONNELL. I know it's kind of weird with the 3 underscores, but I've got a popular name, I guess, on Instagram. But really, that's where I'd love to interact with you guys. I mean, honestly, I would just encourage anybody listening today, like, if you want to, I'm all about continuing the conversation. So shoot me a DM, let's connect. And however I can be a blessing to you, I'd love to do that. So look me up on Instagram and let's continue the journey together.
Love that, bro. Thank you so much. And I look forward to doing another one soon, man.
Sweet, man. Let's do it.